Hey, Evangelos, welcome. Nice to have you here,
Hi, Patrick.
directly
Nice to see
from
you.
from the coasts of Greece, right?
Yeah, I'm in the Argoland.
Nice. So how are you doing today?
I'm very well. It's quite interesting to talk to you. We've already had several interesting conversations. So
Yeah, and this time we're live, right? And other people can see it in the future. So I'm looking forward to that because it's a good document that we can then share with others and then sparkle other conversations.
sure, sure.
Amazing. So let's start. I mean, you are many things. Among them, also like the founder of the Heritage Management organization,
hmm
but
Yeah,
you're also a professor and an academic,
hmm
and you also have multiple levels of interest to technology, s- culture, and everything. So I guess there are so many places I can pick up the conversation, but we can
yeah.
start by you telling us, like, how did you come to do that? What motivated you to be the who you are in your personal life while growing up, and what were the inputs, and how did you get here?
Well, I like people, and I've got a little bit of an attention deficit disorder when it comes to interests. So I like a lot of different things, and so archaeology, like a lot of the humanities, are really about life. And so, being interested in people and being interested in all sorts of different things, you can continue having your interests while you're doing archaeology. Because if you're interested in biotechnology and you are doing archaeology, still fine. You can do quite a lot of things. If you're interested in bones and you do archaeology, same. If you're interested in society and social anthropology, same. So, no matter what you're interested in, um, you can find good applications in archaeology. This applies to a lot of the humanities and to a lot of the disciplines overall. So, but I have I found that I've been very happy in working with the past societies and lives in the past, and heritage now is this is kind of my activism. Yeah.
Amazing. I was muted for a second. So amazing. So when you say activism, and that's also one of the like aspects that I'm very interested in, and I think that's through talking to you, I kind of was able to see heritage as like a political tool, as a social tool, a social, like I was able to really expand my understanding of the meaning uh, of of heritage and the meaning of all of this, yeah, of that, and also the potential for change that comes out of this, and potential of like connecting humans and connecting cultures. And I mean, we had the pleasure of collaborating on a project as
Mhm.
well, where what was about the Iran, right? And I guess your organization has like even like an exception to the sanctions to be able to work with Iran.
That's right.
If and so it's kind of a very privileged thing, and which is also very interesting to see how much like this perspective of heritage management and cultivation of that, how much you can, how neutral this can be in this like such a polarized world. And so I wanted to
Yeah.
just understand how you
Yeah.
see that. Where
Yeah.
do you see the potential of this, and like how do you see that?
Well, okay. So let's start with kind of the fundamental aspects of why heritage is important, perhaps. Um, well, the way I see it, the future has not happened yet, and the present is a very flimsy line that's kind of fleeting. It's kind of the present now, now, now. It's just leaving and is passing, and everything except that one line is the past. So the way we move, everybody, every person, forget about countries, companies, etc. Every individual is actually deciding and functioning in a world that is already in the past. So the past is actually really, really important. And of course, the recent past, the past that we have lived in our lives, is very, very important. Because this is the only thing that we actually have to judge things. Um, you know, I know a language that I have been taught in the past, and I'm communicating with you now because of that language. I see you as a person, and I distinguish the stimuli on the photo that I see on my screen, and can distinguish you from your background. Same with you, with me, just because I have seen people before, and my eyes can actually understand and decipher this photo and this picture. So everything that we do really has to do with our pasts, but actually quite a lot of the things that we do have to do with past that is further back. So I talked about language before. You know, the language that we speak has taken more than 1,000 years to develop. The language that I speak, you know, Greek, has taken 3,500 years to develop at least. And so on, you know, and so these are very old things. And also we function in a world, you know, we live in houses, we go to common spaces, we sometimes go to a temple, or, you know, our religious spaces and so on. And all these things are forms that have taken very long to develop and have been developing for hundreds, if not thousands of years, adapting to the situation. But change, although it's quite fast in many things, is also extremely slow in others. So this is just to say that every individual is really functioning, lives because of the past and with the past. So studying the past is actually a very good way of studying the present and understanding the present. And it's also a very good way of learning more about the future. Okay, so I'm not saying that you can predict the future. Well, you can extrapolate the future perhaps, but that's not the point. Is, you know, you need to understand what are possibilities, what is available, what has happened already, and how people have reacted to similar situations in the past. How have you reacted into similar situations in the past? So really the past is something that we use all the time. Most of us, we use it without thinking very much. And people who study the past think a bit more about it. I think that's the real difference. And different people who study different periods of the past in different parts of the world, or with different groups, specialize further. Or some people specialize in types of materials. Some other people specialize in types of actions. Some other people study cultures or areas, geography, and so on. So all this is the past. Now, from within the past, we may choose bits that we find extremely useful and that we want to keep. And these things we choose voluntarily or involuntarily. So I don't really get to choose the language that my parents teach me by speaking in the house when I'm growing up. But I do get to choose what other language I will learn if I want to learn on my own. I don't get to choose the political beliefs of my parents, but I do get to refine on them as I grow up. But all these really have to do with things that we choose or we don't choose, but things that have crystallized from the past. So I'm sorry that I'm using very general terms, but heritage for me is crystallized elements of the past that we have chosen to crystallize or have crystallized on their own without our input. And so these do not have to be good things, they can be very bad things. Okay, so we do know, um, and a lot of the knowledge about, say, Second World War has crystallized, and it is available, and we can find out about it. And when we see what's going on in the world today, it is unavoidable for a lot of people who have this knowledge available in their memories to draw comparisons. And these different people draw different comparisons depending on the way they see the past, not only the present. Okay, so it's very different if you see the past on the eyes of a neutral country during the Second World War. It's very different if you see the eyes through a country that collaborated with the Nazis during the Second World War. It's different if you see the thing through the eyes of the country that has suffered during the Second World War. And of course, we cannot only talk about countries, we're also talking about people, groups of people. Groups of people were in favor of Hitler, but other people were against him. And so that attitude towards the Second World War, for example, really influences the comparisons people make today. And so, you know, some people are adamant about things. Some other people are kind of more compensating for, you know, other things. And people, you know, feelings run high. It's all about the past. It's all about heritage. And so heritage can be, you know, a positive force. It can be a very negative force. So, but the important thing with heritage management is that we get to choose what to do with heritage. So, because the past is so rich, you can see the past in different ways, you can see the present in different ways. And by looking at the past in different ways, you are interpreting the very same thing in very different ways. And so, you know, learning about the Second World War doesn't necessarily mean you will be against war. It doesn't follow necessarily. And so you can use heritage positively, you can use heritage negatively. You can, I mean, you always use it positively, you think, but people may see it as negative or positive. But the important lesson here is that you can do whatever you like with the past, and you can see different elements of the past that suit what your agenda is. So this is actually quite liberating on the one hand, but also makes us quite responsible on the other hand, because we have to make sure that we use the past in a good way. You see most of the conflicts around the world in our memory involves heritage a lot. Involve religion, heritage. They involve, you know, traditional cradles of a nation, heritage. It involved even linguistics, heritage. And even if heritage was not always the cause, sometimes it is the cause, it became at least the excuse after a point. So it is important that we remember that, you know, heritage can be used for war, but heritage also can unite people and can be used for peace. And it's exactly the same things that can be used for both.
And what is to say about, like, I guess we could agree that we live in times of, like, where disinformation is a very important tool of, like, political tool for some nations, and there's a lot of polarization going on in the world, and there's a lot of, like, the different positions in the world that rely on an idea of a heritage of a place that might be led by misinformation. So how
Of course.
much and how objective can one be about the heritage, and what is what like how do you deal with this idea that then it's just also a selective idea? Like heritage can be very selective, and it can be
Very.
very biased for me to kind of build my my power dynamics that me as a leader want to project into the people.
Heritage has always been used. It's not like a new thing, right? Heritage was used since deep antiquity. For as long as we can see, heritage was used. And so this is not something new. And like we disagree on something that has happened just now, it's very easy to disagree on things that have happened 100 years ago. So, or 50 years ago. So there will always be very different views, and there will always be different uses and manipulations of heritage. In fact, the justification for just about anything has to do with heritage. Now, the particularly important thing about heritage is that it is the basis of our identity. So it's something that is very deeply rooted into the way we think, because everything we think is dependent slightly of how we see ourselves. Okay, so um, what food you eat, what clothes you wear, who are your friends, how you talk, what linguistic types you use when you talk, what music you listen to, ultimately have to do, they contribute to your identity, but they also have to do with how you see yourself. Okay, so that is why heritage is so crucial, because it really defines our lives. And that is why everybody has been playing with heritage since deep antiquity, because they are people, power structures really are making an effort to to influence the conscience of people, basically. So, yes. So there's another comment that is connected to this, that the past is always much richer than we actually learn about it. So I'll give an example, again from the Second World War. My grandfather was a very jolly person, and he was always, joking about things. So if you hear from him about the Second World War, he will tell you lots of jokes. If you take out the jokes, you will see a very stark, very grim reality. There are jokes about losing your friend that was hit by a bomb. There are jokes about this because people had to make fun of these things to survive and to keep their sanity. But if you hear from my grandfather about the Second World War, and I know that he suffered, I know there were times they were so hungry they had to hold the wall, because at some point in Athens in the Second World War, one egg cost 1 gold sterling. Okay, this is what the prices were, because Athens really starved in the Second World War. So I know the time was terrible, but if you hear from him, you'll hear he had a very good time. You'll hear all the illegal parties they did. You'll hear when they just were teasing each other. And you won't hear much about, what terrible things happened. But this is not the history that you read from the books, because the history that you read is quite monolithic, is kind of one-sided. So I'm pretty sure there were people, even in our, that were, just trying to make the best of their time with good humor, and with, trying to ignore the reality or the terrible things that happened. And we don't hear about these things. I'm not saying that, let's go to Auschwitz to have a good time, but I'm just saying that there are so many different people, so many different attitudes, that when you read a history book and you hear how terrible things were or how good things were here and then, these are kind of, it's a bit like watching a documentary. You watch a documentary, it's not the same thing as life. It's just what the person who was writing or a person who is capturing the documentary, what they want to show you. So we should always have that in mind, that life is much richer than TV series or documentary. Life is much richer than a history book.
And do you think, like, with emerging technologies now in AI and all these like data points that we are creating, that we will be able to have a better, more multifaceted view on heritage and our understanding of things? Or you think this is just some utilitarian, techno optimistic idea?
Both. So I think that the easy availability of data, that the accumulation of information online brings, and is that you can quickly retrieve data and not waste time on searching for it, much easier, much faster. So when you think about Auschwitz, you might get 10 documentaries on Auschwitz at the same time with just one Google search. Okay, so that's fantastic, and this means that you have not wasted. Normally to retrieve these, you would need to travel to go to the archives of the television stations, go check these, or read the relevant books, go to the library, do that. So you spend less time to retrieve the data. And that means you spend more time to access the data. And so you can have a greater number of data that you study and you look into, so that you can formulate an opinion. Because ultimately, no matter what you do, it is what your conscience, what you're aware of, that helps you formulate your opinion. So I think that this is, multiple data points, a great accumulation of information, and so on, and easy access are fantastic ways to, go further. On the other hand, what individuals believe is what is important. So no matter what the history books write, if you don't know it, for you it's not important. Okay, so the data may be out there, but unless you know that data, unless you have access to the data inside your brain, you won't know it. Okay, and so when you judge the future, and when you judge the present through the lens of what you know, you will always be judging through what you know, irrespective of what data is out there. Okay, so no, it will not change things. It will not be a quantum leap when it comes to judging the future, judging the present, designing it. It will be, however, a very important step forward, because it will make data, multifaceted data, available at the end of your fingertips, which is fantastic for doing research and making research available to more people, and so democratizing research in some ways. Of course, with the dangers that come with democratizing research, which are the dangers of anything. Any progress has got good things about it, and there are some pitfalls. But there are pitfalls about, press. um, so it's not like you, when you read the newspaper, they present to you reality in a monofaceted, monolithic way, as we were saying earlier. It's not the reality. If you've
Especially
lived
when
that
they
reality,
have to
it's different.
compete, especially
Yes.
when they have to compete with clickbait or
Yeah.
like sort of like
Yeah.
companies that are technological companies, then they
Yeah.
just kind of have to appeal to like,
Exactly.
yeah. So it's a lot about the incentive systems behind it as well. But I wanted to also ask you about the experience. Like, I know that like a heritage management organization is providing courses
Hmm.
in different countries,
Hmm.
continents,
Hmm.
and educating people about the different facets of heritage. And I wanted you to just share a bit on what those courses are, what do they do,
Hmm.
and what is the impact that you have seen in the lives of the people
Yeah.
based on those courses.
Thank you. Okay, so um, we are all one way or another managing heritage. Okay, so we speak a language, we have photo albums of our families, we have the recipe books of our families, and so on. These are heritage, and these are items of heritage that we are managing. But there are, big repositories of heritage, either because they are big monuments or big archaeological sites or big museums or libraries or archives or what have you, digital or physical, that are, repositories of heritage that a lot of different people refer to, or that it belonged to many different people, large groups, and so on. And the people and institutions that are responsible for these collections of heritage, or this more kind of widespread heritage, or uh, bigger heritage, or more relevant heritage in some ways. It really depends. I do not really want to pin it down to one thing. But these people whose job is to manage heritage are actually very important people for us, because they manage something that is important to a lot of us, if not all of us. And there are very few. What is more is that the world, although theoretically are saying that heritage is actually quite important and so on, this is actually quite easy to accept. There is very little investment in the heritage sector. Even though it is already accepted, for example, that tourism is connected to heritage quite closely. Um, there is money in tourism, but there is no money in the heritage world. So this means that not only these people are important, but also they're underfunded, and they are few in comparison to the importance of what they manage. So uh, in our efforts to try and help the situation, because heritage is something asymmetrical, it grows faster than you can even record it. Okay, you discover new heritage every day from the deeper past, or you create new heritage every day by just being. Okay, so it's an asymmetrical challenge. And one of the ways to help the situation is to help the people who are already responsible be able to gain access to the knowledge they need in order to be able to fulfill their own mission, their own dream, their own vision, so on. So, looking at what these people do and where these people come from, you very quickly realize that most of these people come from the humanities, social sciences, and they have studied art history, archaeology, history, anthropology, um, uh, maybe art, and that's it for for the greater majority of the people working in the heritage sector. But when you see what they do on their day to day, you will see they manage people, budgets, projects, crises, so on. They fundraise, they try to create strategies, they communicate to new audiences, to current audiences. They try to educate uh, different groups. They try to promote. They try to communicate through mainstream means or social media, and they try to use technologies, most of which are not very new, but they consider new. And for most of these things, engage with local communities, engage with multiple groups. So for most of these degrees, none of these skills are there, or most of these skills are not there. So basically, we established the organization with the effort to create the training programs, high quality training programs, to all these people who are responsible for heritage, to gain access to the knowledge they need in order to fulfill their vision. And so we do this at 3 different levels. It's what we call executive education. So these are 3-day intensive workshops, very focused on a topic, with a world expert working with us for 1.5 years to adapt their knowledge to the heritage sector. And, these are instructors from all over the world and students from all over the world. Students meaning heritage managers, professionals from all over the world attending. And then we have a master's program, which is a more comprehensive solution. So the executive educations are focused on one topic, let's say managing human resources for heritage organizations, fundraising, or community engagement, or digitization, 3D laser scanning, photogrammetry. The master's program is more kind of comprehensive. And then there are summer programs on community engagement, which is key topic for us, and heritage digitization. So photogrammetry, GIS, geographical information systems, and laser scanning. So through these programs, we've trained almost 1,400 people from 90 countries. And of course, we have a real great motivation to increase the number of people we train every year. So churn out more people that gain access to this information, but also to increase the width, the breadth of the topics that we cover, because we do not really feel that we are exhausting the skills that are necessary for the different groups of people that we're working for. And of course, this can only happen in a non-for-profit way, because there's not money, as I said earlier, for the heritage sector. It's not hospital management, it's not university management, it's heritage management. So I think that's what we do, and we have a great motivation to to do more every year and to try and focus on countries. So you mentioned Iran. We've been working with Iran for 3 years now. Correctly, you said we are the only OFAC licensed, exempt from sanctions, to work with the training of civil servants in Iran in the heritage sector. But we also work in the Gambia. We work in Benin. We work in Ethiopia. And we've got quite a large footprint in countries like Turkey, Greece, of course, Rwanda, Ghana, Tanzania, and so on.
Amazing. And one thing that I think also we talked about that I think is super interesting, it's like you have this whole heritage as like being able to look at the past and then being able to excavate, measure, outline all this history. But then there is also like cultures that have more like some sort of heritage that is also like a cultural thing, a way of doing something, a way of being, a way of doing some music, or like how do you differentiate those and how do you approach that?
People differentiate those. They shouldn't. The heritage world, unfortunately, is quite Eurocentric. So we've learned to appreciate monuments. So other cultures that have monuments, like in India or in Iran, sound great. You know, in Mexico, sounds great. And everyone who doesn't have monuments, people wonder what's their heritage. This is a big mistake, um, because the majority of heritage is not monumental. Heritage, as I said earlier, is very personal, and we're not talking about physical things necessarily. Okay, so there are aspects of any heritage that are not physical. So the Parthenon on the Acropolis of Athens is very physical, very tangible. But if you don't know anything about architecture, or democracy, or ancient Greek history, or ancient Athenian history, or the alliances, or the Persians, or whatever, it doesn't actually, it doesn't actually mean anything. It's a pile of rocks. Maybe a beautiful pile of rocks because you have learned that this is beautiful, but it's a pile of rocks. And as I said, you've learned it's beautiful, and so this is again something that is not physical. So the majority of the content, let's say, is not physical. It's actually in the air. It's in your mind, and vice versa. You think that a song is not physical, yet a song is sung by someone, maybe written somewhere. It needs instruments to be played, and there is a physical space where it is being performed. So, and with a particular echo and particular, physical elements. So there's no such thing as the definition, the division, the artificial division for analytical purposes that is given, started by UNESCO, talking about tangible heritage and intangible heritage. There's no such differentiation. But what has happened is that for historic reasons, we treat monuments differently than we treat all the rest. And monuments are like 1-2% of all the heritage in the world. 98%, if not more, is not physical. It's the stories that I've heard from my grandma. It's the recipes of my grandma. They are the history of my family and so on. There's much more content there than just the physical stuff. But because of the different historic periods where these were recognized, they are currently being treated differently. So we're treating monuments as something that needs to be preserved, and that's something that needs to be fossilized to a particular period in time. So we're trying to delete time from monuments. Whereas with songs or with recipes, we accept the fluidity of time, and we accept the richness of the diversity of different people singing the same song in different ways, and different people making the same recipe in different ways, and everyone making their own recipe with the same name even, but in different ways, or with different names. Similar idea. So on the one hand, we accept the fluidity of things, and we try to kind of keep the fluidity of things and the dynamism of heritage when we're talking about non-physical things, which, as I said, have a lot of physical elements. But we're trying to preserve and keep solid and crystallized and fossilized the physical things, and we're trying to keep them as they were in one period, trying to delete time from them since, which is impossible, of course. And I think that's wrong.
And how do you think it should be done?
Well, it cannot be done because everybody agrees that physical things have to be preserved, whereas non-physical things don't have to be preserved. So I cannot actually change the world by just saying things. I mean, who knows? But but really, the idea here is that this is how things work. And if this was a new planet and I was world dictator, which is not happening, and I don't want to, and I have no interest in. But if that was the case, just for the discussion's sake, I would be thinking about the dynamism of heritage that is physical, and I would be, be interested to study and follow rather than put together or delete time from. And I wouldn't feel bad about restoring something, but I would include my restoration of something in the historical trajectory of something, and I would try to celebrate previous states. This is partly happening in some areas, but we're very far from this. This is really not. So at the moment, we're talking about integrity of monuments. We're talking about authenticity. And these are big words that actually end up crystallizing things and keeping things intact as they were at one point of time. I would be instead be talking about dynamic authenticity and dynamic integrity, looking at how the integrity changes through time, looking at how authenticity changes through time. And authenticity does change through time, integrity does change through time, it's just that we are trying to resist. So I would be resisting less, or at least accepting forms of resistance that are not considered good practice, easier than people are at the moment.
Understand. And in terms of like interacting in this world of heritage, and you as an archaeologist and as also as an academic and as a practical human being, like what do you think can can be done better there? What are the things that you're looking into? What are the things that you wish were revolutionized or changed?
Man, this is a very big question, and this is, this is something that is an endless conversation. But I think if I was to pick one, I would just say we really need to make it more interesting, and we really need to be a bit less reverent of the past. So we should understand the past and understand that past people are not sacred human beings. They are human beings. And so we should not feel like respect for the past is ultimate. Okay. And so at the same time, this would mean, there are obviously extremes, and you can have no respect for the past whatsoever, and that can destroy heritage. So I wouldn't go for that option. I would go for the option of a bit less sacred past and a bit less idealization of the past, so that we can use the past, so that we can benefit from the past, so that we can exploit the past, and ultimately we can make the past much more interesting for younger people, because this is for me one of the greatest bets of the heritage world, is they have to make things interesting, because at the moment the younger generations, for the last half a century at least, are losing interest in their past. And ultimately, this is going to hurt them, because they're going to be less nuanced when it comes to making decisions for the future. The idea that I don't need to learn because I can Google it is actually wrong. And I do not want to sound like a boomer, but it's actually quite the opposite. Because you can Google it and you can get access to good information, you must learn good information, more good information, so that you can make more high quality decisions in the future. Because ultimately, the decisions are not going to be made by Google for you. You have to make your decisions. You have to decide for yourself. And thanks to Google and other search engines, you have greater access to greater information, and you can see different and opposing views. Thanks to Wikipedia, you can see different and opposing views. And you have less excuses to learn more than you did in the past. So what I'm saying is, we should be using the technology, but ultimately we shouldn't stop being interested ourselves and learning ourselves, because ultimately it is us that have to make the decisions if we don't want to be sheep.
Interesting. I have one question. Maybe it's not really related, but I'm just very curious about your view there. If you look at like First Nation people all over the world, right, and how many governments like relate to them and to their people, um, how does that fit into the heritage and conversation, and how should that be, what should be a good way to kind of understand that heritage of these First Nation people?
Okay, so I don't want to speak about a particular group because there are good groups and not so good groups. There are groups with dark past and groups with darker past, and I think all people are equal one way or another, or should be anyway, and they're not. But actually learning about one's past and learning about others people's past is actually very, very important. And we had a very interesting century was the 19th century, where national identities were forged. But before the 19th century, we had other interesting centuries which were less national identity, more fluid identity, and less kind of national groups. Smaller groupings, different ways of defining oneself, and so on. And the 19th century had an idea which was involving blood as part of the definition of how one belongs to a group. And, I come from a country where we don't believe in this thing. In Greece, the traditional way is education. So you belong to a group because you're part of the education of that group. And so anyone can belong to that group if they have that education. And so just seeing the animosity between the two different ideas is actually quite interesting, because Greece also went through the 19th century, and there are many people in Greece also that believe in blood as a defining group. So these are very interesting ideas, but the more you know about them and the more you know about how other people define themselves, the more respectful you can be of them. Now, there are what we call native groups, okay? And again, I come from a country where everybody believes they're native. And this is not the case. And this is not the case with the groups that call themselves native groups either. But they're more native than the newcomer groups, let's say. They are the older people. So the so-called native groups, because of their heritage, they develop a special relationship with their land. And that relationship is essential for their lives. The greatest example I can give you is hunter-gathering groups in central Kalahari. Okay, and the government of Botswana had a long-term policy of trying to voluntarily self-evict the indigenous groups of the central Kalahari. Okay, so these are as close to indigenous as you would get anywhere, because these people have been there for at least 15 to 20,000 years. So we know that these groups were there, and they were using similar land, not the same, but similar land. Now, once you take them out of that land, these people are useless. They don't know anything. They know everything about that land. They know how to get watermelons and find water in the middle of the desert at any season. where they can find it, how they can find it. They know how to manage game, how to hunt, where to find the prey, how to process it, and so on. You take them away from their land and you put them in a town. Totally useless people. They don't know what to do. They know nothing, whereas they knew everything where they were. And so ultimately, you're destroying their lives. Okay. So you asked me what is my view about these people. My view is that although you may find academic arguments why you disagree they're not native, or that they are native, or that they don't have exclusive rights to their land and you do as well, and so on and so forth, you should actually respect people. And by respecting people is allowing them to have access to their heritage, because their heritage, in some of these cases, is not only essential for their identity, in some of these cases, they're also essential for their survival. And because you must respect people, I think most religions in the world, even lack of religion in the world, in fact, even more, would lay a stress on people. I think this is something that we can call a universal in humankind. You must respect people. And anyone who doesn't respect people is bad. This is as close to black and white as it gets in ethics. I think because you respect people, you must respect their heritage, and you must allow them to have access to their heritage. Because you destroy their heritage, you actually destroy them.
Yeah, that's a good and clear definition. I am happy with that. I mean, yeah, I think that clarifies, and I think that's yeah. I mean, thinking in the case of Brazil, and we have like, for example, even tribes in Brazil that have never had contact, right? And so it's just that argumentation or the understanding of like how to deal with that, or also
Exactly.
delineating territory. Or for instance, I know, like, for example, in Brazil we have like different indigenous tribes. They have like their place, but they're not allowed to exploit financially their natural resources there, whereas in the rest you are. So there's like all this
Exactly.
really, really complicated discussions. And but I think, yes, the allowing them, I mean, for example, what happened to bikini, and like what the Americans did there is so sad. I'm not sure if you're familiar with like all the atomic experiments, and they remove all the people
And
from the
you know,
I think I lost you for a second. Are you there? And let's see if you're back. In any ways, we're already running out of time, but I
hi.
think you're back. Yeah, perfect. You're back.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just
Yeah. So
reminded
this
me of what
applies
happened to bikini, for example, with the people being
Yeah.
removed, and there was all these
Exactly.
atomic experiments and so on.
Exactly.
And now all these people are kind of like they have nothing,
And in
no
war,
meaning.
in war, you occupy someone's land and you destroy their heritage, because that happens very often in war. You destroy people's heritage. These people cannot come back. I mean, they have nothing to come back to. Um, you destroy their religion. People who believe, you destroy their main risk mitigating mechanism. This is actually really a very big problem, because you may not kill people, but if you destroy their temple or the sanctuary or whatever, you destroy the soul of their land when it comes to them. Um, so that's actually stronger a destruction, a more long-term a destruction than killing people.
Yeah. Really amazing. We're running out of our time here,
Thank you.
but I wanted to thank you so much for sharing all all your insights and wisdom here. I think this was really, really interesting conversation. I mean, I got to learn even more from you,
Thank you,
and
Pedro.
that is great. And I think for the others watching is also, I'm sure, very, very interesting. So
Next
yeah,
time over a glass of wine.
for sure. That's amazing. So yeah, thanks so much
Very
for
good.
the time,
Thank you, Pedro.
and I wish you a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too. All the best. Bye.